Yeah, and the other interesting piece, once they made the decision to do this with everyone who was coming up from the organization, from lead hand up to senior level supervisors, managers, when they decided to do that with everyone who was either applying for a job internally or externally, or who'd been tagged as having leadership potential, and they asked us if we would prepare a report after I did the session, and you and I worked on that report and what it should say, and how to be clear with the candidate that we could keep some things confidential, but that we were going to report, and it would go to their supervisor and the plant manager. So it's a kind of an interesting thing as you're trying to figure out how you can provide the information at all levels of the organization, while still having the candidate feel that they have some ability to tell you things in confidence and to have a conversation about where they're interested in leadership. Because some people were really interested and some people weren't.
Yeah. Well, and at least I think one of the things about that process is you want to make sure that everyone is getting something out of the process, so you're not just taking people's information and giving it to someone else. There is an opportunity for everyone who's taking an assessment or completing a personality test to get their results and to have the opportunity to provide feedback and explain what that means. Because sometimes, especially if you're using it in a selection measure, you really want to make sure you're using it to inform your decision, but you're using other sources of information, right? And so you can, if you see some clear trends in personality traits or something, you could ask the person about that and say, okay, what does that mean in a different role? Or how have you used that previously? Or how do you think that's going to interact with people on, your potential team or the leadership team? The other thing that I think they did really well is starting with the top, because a lot of times you see organizational changes or initiatives that, the leadership team is doing to everyone else. Whereas in this case, it's something that they took and used really effectively first. So I think that people trust that experience a lot more when you see the leadership team doing it and they're communicating and explaining why they're doing it, what the effects are, and especially if they can, share some of their results or share why they're doing it and share the reason they're doing it. Then people will be a bit more trusting in the process, a bit more accepting of the process if it's something that everyone goes through. So I think they're a good example of an organization who have done it quite effectively on a number of levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is as we started to do the HPTI and at the plant level, those senior managers had been through the process themselves. So when they saw the result, they had some context to understand what they were looking at. I worked with another organization, and the first couple of reports we had candidates with very high excessive level results on several traits, including competitiveness, over and over and over again. Yeah. And they thought that was really good. And so it's because they didn't have the context and they hadn't used it as effectively perhaps as the first organization. We had to have some conversations about what the results meant and where that might be okay and in what kinds of circumstances and jobs. So
yeah, because in any personality or, these kind of assessments, people who don't have a lot of experience assume that higher scores are always better, right? But which is not always the case. Or there's usually some nuance to that,
Yeah. I mean, it's been a really interesting process because we've been working with that company for nearly 3 years now. And you just see how clearly how completely it's embedded in the system, but it's only one of the tools that's used, which I say is kind of the key to how a good way to do that.
Yeah, with the kind of proper debriefs and explanation and making sure they're using the tools in a very informed and effective way.
Yes, great.